I have waited years for this very moment. And now I finally get to use everything I learned in the past 20 years of making art to bring one of my dream projects to life. Join me today as I conquer one of my most challenging paintings to date, featuring none other than the ghost of Sparta himself. So let's begin. A painting at this scale is not something to be taken lightly. This is probably the closest thing I have ever painted to a mural and not something I'm admittedly very experienced in. At this size, it's super easy to lose sight of what is what when you're standing in front of the canvas. So I decided to spend some time drawing in some light and shadow areas before even picking up a brush. The idea was to give me a solid foundation to work on and make it a bit easier for me to see what is what when I stand in front of the canvas. With the drawing in place, I got to work on the eyes and the angry demigod's gaze. This giant canvas entire composition is designed to have Kratos' eyes as the main focal point. So if there is one thing that I knew, it's that I had to get this right from the start, or I might not be able to fix it later on, making this very early stage not only one of the most essential, but also intimidating parts of the entire process. I'll be honest, I don't think I've been this nervous while painting in over 10 years or so. I guess it's the fact that I've been thinking about painting this painting for such a long time, probably the last 2 to 3 years, and I've built it up in my head so much that the finished painting can't possibly live up to my own expectations, which is kind of sad if you think about it. But there's nothing I can do except for adjusting my expectations and create the best painting that I can. But I really want this to be special and epic and mind-blowing, ideally. To say that I was thrilled to finally paint this painting is an understatement. A bit intimidated, but thrilled. I don't think I've had this much fun painting in years. Maybe it's the childlike motivation behind a painting like this, because it is as simple as Kratos is badass, so I paint badass Kratos painting. But maybe it's just that I spent a week in my studio painting something that is so over the top that a lot of people will probably think that I'm kinda crazy. But once I felt a bit more confident about what I was doing, I continued the work on Kratos' iconic face, focusing on capturing his unique skin. Unique because Kratos' skin is not exactly flesh-colored. If you don't know, his body is covered with a layer of ash, giving his skin an almost pearlescent quality. Coincidentally, a perfect match for my unconventional way of painting skin, which creates an almost shimmering translucent effect by layering and exaggerating cool and warm colors. But speaking of exaggerating, it may sound like your typical YouTube hyperbole when I say things like, I've been thinking and dreaming about painting this painting here for years or a decade, but you know what? In this case, it's actually true. Ever since I played the first 2 games, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be amazing if I painted a giant epic painting of this badass character? The reason why I haven't done it any sooner is that, for one, I didn't have a good reason to do it. Making a painting like this not only takes a lot of time, but quite frankly, also a lot of money, both of which I just didn't have when I was in my early 20s. It's not that I have more time nowadays, but with the release of the new game, God of War Ragnarök, and having a couple weeks off after finishing my solo show, it's almost like the stars aligned perfectly for this painting to finally come into existence. The other more important reason I didn't paint this painting earlier is that I simply knew that I didn't have the abilities and skill to bring my vision to life. And you know what? When I started this painting, there was a point where I, at least for a moment, wondered if I maybe still wasn't ready. Creating the illusion of a living, breathing being is already challenging at this scale, but with a video game character or a 3D model as a reference, it turned out to be even more difficult than I thought. Yeah. This is basically how I feel right now. This is one entire day of work, and I don't like it. It's not that I hate it, but I'm not super happy with this. Something isn't quite right. I can't really put my finger on what it is exactly. But maybe I'm expecting too much at this point. I mean, this is only the first layer, and I'm probably gonna at least add 2 more layers to this painting. So it's very early on, but I want it to be great. So I'm gonna finish this whole area here, which should be fairly easy in comparison. And then I will try to implement some different tricks and techniques to really make it stand out. But yeah, at least it looks like Kratos. So. What can I say? The typical roller coaster of being an artist. You feel insecure in the morning, confident at noon, and at the end of the day, komplett am Boden zerstört, as we like to say in Germany, which roughly translates to completely destroyed on the ground. But I kept hearing Kratos in my mind, boy, don't mess this up. So I kept going, of course, and after the face I worked on the shoulder armor or pauldron. I know this part doesn't look like much. In fact, it seems a bit like I don't know what I'm doing, but it's absolutely essential groundwork for the next layer. It may not look like it, but this first layer is actually the result of 20 years of observing and painting and understanding textures, which will maybe make a bit more sense once we get to the second layer. I spent the entire third day repainting and reworking the face. Making something look three-dimensional or capturing a likeness is relatively easy, but as I already mentioned, it's challenging to paint something that looks believable in the sense that you are looking at a living and breathing being. There's a lot of things that goes into creating such an illusion, but by far, in my experience, the most overlooked thing is capturing different surface qualities and textures. Making skin look like a translucent material, making hair look like a collection of individual hair strands that reflect light in a particular way, and so on and so forth. So I spent an entire day using different painting techniques for different parts of his face, in the hopes of creating at least a somewhat believable illusion. Day 4, and things are looking so much better now. I can't wait to put on the finishing touches. I still want to add some detail and really make him stand out, but I'm gonna leave it till the end because I need the background in order to know where I need to make some changes and adjustments. But before I get to the background, I want to finish some of his armor pieces, so today we're painting some metal. I used a similar approach with a heavy focus on texture for the second layer of his armor pieces. This is also where the first layer of paint I put down comes into play. One of the things that I do, that I never really see anyone else do, is that I treat parts of my painting almost like a 3D model. I first paint the color of an object, then I create the texture, and then only in the very last step I paint light and shadow. Doing this allows me to capture textures and surface effects that I otherwise just couldn't. The metal here, for instance, shouldn't just look glossy, but like a solid chunk of brushed metal that catches the light with a super subtle sheen. And the leather shouldn't just look like a brown material, but like worn, heavy skin of an animal that's thick and full of scratches and discolorations. And after working on the armor pieces for a while, it was finally time for some major decisions. Today is gonna be interesting. Today I'll be painting the background, and initially I wanted to keep things simple. Meaning that I'm gonna paint a very simple uniform background, let the figure speak for itself, but then I saw the trailer yesterday one more time, and there is this one scene at the end where Kratos and his son are facing a giant wolf in the middle of the woods. The landscape was super moody and atmospheric, and it was a nighttime scene. And now I'm kinda intrigued by the idea of creating a giant painting that also has atmospheric perspective, meaning that when you stand in front of it, it almost feels like you can walk into it or grab into it, at least in theory. No idea if it's gonna work out, but I think I'm gonna try something different for a change. So let's go. Since I had already put so much heart and soul into this project, I thought I could go the extra mile and paint a landscape in the background. A super moody and mysterious looking forest by night from the new game's trailer. Very little did I know that the amount of paint and logistics needed to pull this off would take me 2 entire days. Granted, the landscape that I chose wasn't exactly the easiest to paint. especially at this scale. But the thing that made it so challenging was mixing and matching all the subtle color variations to create the illusion of a forest full of trees lit by misty moonlight. This was also the point where I realized something I hadn't thought about before. See, I don't really have a good reason to create this piece of art other than just I want to. I don't get paid for it. It's really a passion project of mine, but that also comes with a not so trivial issue. What am I gonna do with this colossal painting once it's finished? I mean, it's almost as big as one of the walls in my studio, so leaving it in my studio is not really an option in the long run. Sell it maybe, but who's gonna buy a giant painting like this? A fan maybe? Maybe a passionate video game YouTuber? I have no idea. Friends, I'd love if you could help me with this little conundrum. Where should or could this painting go? Or what should I do with it? Is there any place or any person you can think of? A video game museum maybe, or should it be with the video game developers? All I know is I would love it if it didn't end up in the storage room of my studio. But getting back to the painting, after working on the background for 2 entire days and bringing it to a point where I felt it complemented the figure in the foreground without taking too much attention away from it, it was finally time to wrap things up, bring everything together, and the finale of this epic painting journey. Done. I'm not gonna lie, it feels a bit unreal that this painting actually exists. Is it the epic and mind-blowing painting that I and you hope for? All I can say is that for an entire week, I had the biggest smile on my face while doing what I love to do. And that is more than I could have hoped for. I would love to hear how you like the painting, of course. Ideas on what I should or could do with it. Honestly, I'm a bit lost on that. Leave a like and a comment down below and share this video with someone who appreciates this crazy painting as much as you and I do. I, for one, am incredibly excited about this painting and this whole video. This video game fine art crossover thing. I mean, can you imagine how epic this could get if you start making compositions with multiple characters and different video games? Endless possibilities. Friends, thank you all for the support, your patience. I know this has been in the making for quite some time. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters, without whom I couldn't have realized this project. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.